Hello everyone, my name is Sarah and this is my creative critical reflection for ACE Media Studies. Question 1. How does your product use or challenge conventions and how does it represent social groups or issues? My film, A Game Called Death, is a horror movie. In my film, we use standard conventions like dark lighting in some scenes. To add on, we had some eerie sound effects at the beginning of our film and at the end. My film also contained an isolated setting at the end, which is a standard convention. A specific example would be the bathroom scene at the park. I also had a high angle shot in one of my scenes, which showed that the two characters were isolated, vulnerable, and scared. My film was also linear, which provided the audience with a slow tension building opening instead of immediate action, which built suspense. It also made it easier to understand overall. My film challenges conventions since in the first half of our film we have mostly bright lighting instead of immediately starting with dark lighting. Although my film doesn't represent social issues, it does appeal to women. My film is led by two characters who are both female, and the movie would slowly construct them as independent protagonists capable of surviving all the games they would go through, instead of stereotypically being represented as weak and dependent. We did this to show that the women in these kinds of survival movies aren't always dependent on the lead male character, which would empower the woman in my audience. My film also appeals to people who like horror movies and science fiction. We did this since horror is an easily recognizable genre and is easier to appeal to. The science fiction aspect gives us creative freedom and appeals to people who like unnatural things happening in films, which happened when everybody in the film except for the two main characters disappeared. While our film follows genre conventions, it also adds originality, which makes the film more interesting for our audience. And two, how does your product engage with the audiences and how would it be distributed as a real media text? The beginning of my film engages the audience with outside, diegetic nature sounds, and then it transitions to calm music, which relaxes the audience. Non-diegetic, eerie music in the closet and the bathroom creates suspense and slight tension and keeps the audience engaged. The multiple point of view shots are also capture the audience's attention since it makes it feel more immersive as if they were actually in the world of the film. The sharp sting at the end of my film also engages with the audience since it comes from nowhere and it indicates something happened, but the abrupt stop gives no context. These elements create an enigma code, making the audience question what will happen next. My film's target audience is teenagers, the people in their mid-20s, and if it went through the MPA, it would likely be rated as PG-13 since there would only be slight gore. This rating would make it more accessible to the younger side of my audience. This is because my film's two main characters are teenage girls, and someone older might find it harder to relate to them. The film's runtime would be around an hour and 45 minutes, so it's best suited to be physically distributed through theaters like AMC. This would be widely released to reach a larger audience. However, it would then transition digitally to a streaming platform like Netflix to make it more accessible, especially to my younger audience. According to the uses and gratifications theory, my audience may watch the film for entertainment and escapism, since the suspenseful scenes allow them to experience fear in a safe environment. This applies to my younger target audience, who may use films as a form of escapism from everyday stress. Lastly, marketing through social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok would help attract the teenage demographic, as these platforms are most commonly used by the target audience. That's it for now, and thank you so much for hearing about my creative critical reflection. Although, I still think something's missing.
So, how did your production skills develop throughout this project?
Before I started my film, I had no prior knowledge of the different kinds of shots, movements, or editing techniques used, or how heavily it impacts a film. I learned how to use a tripod and a support rig. Some other editing techniques are cutting shots to make a scene look a bit more seamless and realistic, changing the opacity of the audio, inserting sound effects and cutting them up, and aligning the sound effect to a specific shot. I did all of this in my video, but I cut some of the recorded shots with the basic editing options Apple provides in your camera roll. Learning these camera and editing techniques helped me make the film look more professional and follow real media production conventions. Another editing technique I learned on video is removing the background audio, which was essential to most of our shots where we wanted no noise. I also learned how to plan and communicate better with my partner since we had different schedules. We also learned that time management was extremely important in recording our film since we had other classes to do work for as we did our film. This reflects how real media productions require teamwork and planning. My problem-solving skills also greatly improved, since some shots or ideas we couldn't do. Whether it was due to time or lack of equipment and resources, we usually resolved any issues through improv, slightly changing the plot, setting, or simple research if it had something to do with editing. My teacher also helped us a lot with any issues that came up and gave us other ideas to add when we were stuck. These challenges helped me develop skills similar to those used in real film production.
So, how did you integrate technologies such as like software, hardware, and online into this project?
Well, during our research stage, we used Google and YouTube to look at thriller or horror openings. We also used those inspo to create the overall plot of our film to some extent. We especially used Netflix since most of my partner and I's favorite series and movies are on there. We noticed some common themes and chose to put those technical elements in our film, and this also helped us understand the conventions that our target audience expects from horror films. We also used the Notes app on our phones to write down what we wanted to do for our film and the storyline ideas we had. During our planning stage, we used our storyboard to plan shots, our phones to test specific shots, and shared docs to communicate our ideas. During the production stage, we used an iPhone 15 Pro and an iPhone 13 mini. We also used a tripod for stabilization and recorded actual nature sounds at the beginning. For editing, we used the basic iPhone editing that's available on the Photos app, but we mostly used VidVideo for everything. Some sound effects we created ourselves and others we got off non-copyrighted sites. The rest of the sound effects we got from WeVideo completely. We used WeVideo to add sound effects and for cuts and transitions. Editing allowed us to create suspense through sounds and cuts, which is important for appealing to horror audiences. We used default.com for our title, but the credits were done on WeVideo. All of these things helped appeal to my audience since they helped me understand what my audience likes in horror films, allowing me to follow the conventions of the thriller genre, such as suspenseful music, dark lighting, and immersive camera shots, which teenage audiences find engaging and entertaining.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, I had so much fun creating this project.